All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're exploring some of the most breathtaking yet incredibly unforgiving environments on our planet. We're going to uncover a pretty unsettling reality today, the fact that nature's most beautiful cave systems can actually harbor completely invisible traps. And we're talking about traps that operate with such terrifying speed, they can literally end a life in under a single minute. It really makes you wonder, right? What actually happens when that line between a serene natural wonder and a fatal trap just vanishes? Well, today we're going to act as forensic investigators. We're going to look closely at the data and categorize 4 unique scientific phenomena that turned completely calm scenarios into rapid, irreversible disasters in less than 60 seconds. We'll be breaking down the mechanical, the chemical, the hydrodynamic, and the physiological.
First up, we're looking at mechanical failure, specifically the supersonic whip at Sterkfontein.
Picture this scene for a second. You're in South Africa's Gauteng province on a freezing cold morning. Right beneath you are the Sterkfontein Caves. Now, this system is famous for ancient fossils, sure, but it is equally infamous for its danger. We are talking about deep, vertical shafts of jagged limestone that just plummet dozens of meters down into absolute pitch-black darkness. And at the bottom of one of these shafts, an injured caver is trapped. To get him out, a highly experienced rescue team puts together a plan with absolutely zero room for error. They strap him securely to a steel stretcher, attach that to a heavy-duty cable rated for thousands of pounds, and use a motorized pulley to haul him straight up the shaft.
Now, the physics of what happens next are just absolutely terrifying. The stretcher starts to rise, the cable is groaning, stretching totally taut under all that weight. And then, without a single warning sign, that steel wire reaches its breaking point and snaps with the deafening sound of a gunshot. When a cable under that much tension breaks, it doesn't just fall, it becomes a supersonic whip. This means the broken end of the cable violently recoils through that shaft at a speed literally faster than the human eye can even follow.
And the wildest part of this whole thing? The timeline. In less than 1 second, we're talking less than a single heartbeat here, this loose cable whipped back and struck a young rescue volunteer who was just standing on a narrow ledge. The impact hit his torso with the force of a speeding car, slamming him against the rock wall behind him. There was absolutely no time to shout a warning, no time to even duck. The catastrophic internal trauma was immediate. He was tragically dead before his body even hit the ground. It was a mechanical failure that turned a controlled rescue into a complete tragedy in a fraction of a second. The injured caver, miraculously enough, actually survived the drop and was rescued later.
Moving on to number 2, chemical traps. Let's talk about the invisible gas pocket in Florida.
Okay, so we're moving from solid limestone to the humid swamps of Florida back in 1999. Deep in the Woodville Karst Plain, an elite Air Force rescue diver named Hayden descended into a flooded limestone tunnel. Now, Hayden was highly experienced in open water, but he actually lacked formal cave diving certification. The ceiling of these specific tunnels is full of these uneven pockets carved out over millions of years. And right here is where the trap lies. Breathable air pockets versus deadly gas pockets. From underwater, they look completely identical to a diver. It's just a small, dark space above the surface where you'd think, hey, I can lift my head and grab a quick breath of fresh air. But while some of these do contain safe air, others are heavily concentrated with carbon dioxide or hydrogen sulfide just seeping right out of the rock.
So Hayden spots one of these pockets. Thinking it's a perfectly safe place to breathe, he lifts his face above the waterline, takes his regulator out of his mouth, and takes a breath. And this brings us to CO2 narcosis. The pocket he breathed from had a concentration of carbon dioxide well over 10%. At these extreme levels, your body actually doesn't trigger a choking or coughing reflex. It doesn't make you gasp for air. It simply shuts your brain down in a single inhalation. Hayden's consciousness was switched off, like a light switch. His eyes rolled back, his body went limp, and he just slid away from the pocket in complete silence.
This whole event just brilliantly and tragically illustrates the sheer, terrifying speed of this chemical trap. Hayden had a camera strapped to his gear, and it actually kept recording as he sank in slow motion toward the tunnel floor. From the exact moment he removed his regulator to the moment his heart stopped, less than 60 seconds had passed. And you know what the most haunting irony of all this is? When his body was recovered, investigators checked his gear and found his air tank still held 170 bars of perfectly good breathing gas. To put that in perspective, that is more than enough to have completed the dive completely safely, if only he hadn't trusted that invisible trap.
All right, number 3 on our list is hydrodynamic force. Let's look at the piston effect at Tancon.
taking us from totally still waters to coastal turbulence. In August 2021, a 33-year-old woman named Jasmine Ben Ali and her friends visited this absolutely stunning location in Tenerife called El Tancon. Now, looking at it from the surface, it looks like this hidden, secret paradise. You've got these black volcanic walls enclosing completely still, crystal-clear turquoise water. Despite the warning signs posted around, they got into the pool. But what they didn't realize was that this wasn't a natural swimming pool at all. It was actually a volcanic blowhole connected directly to a massive, complex maze of deep Atlantic underwater tunnels.
Let's break down exactly how this builds into an inescapable hazard. This right here is the anatomy of the piston effect. Out in the ocean, a single large swell rolls in. It pushes forcefully into those underwater tunnels. As that water surges in, the air inside the cave is violently compressed. It basically acts like a giant, unstoppable water pump. In under 10 seconds, the water level inside the cave can rise from waist deep all the way up to the rocky ceiling, slamming anything inside against the walls. Then, almost instantly, the water reverses direction, creating this sudden, massive vacuum that sucks everything right back out through those dark tunnels.
For Jasmine and her friends, the sea outside looked totally peaceful, which meant they had absolutely zero warning. An unseen ocean swell surged into the cave. Instantly, that calm, glowing water erupted into a violent, churning whirlpool. They were thrown around like rag dolls, slammed against the jagged lava rock with thousands of pounds of crushing force. And then, the vacuum pulled them beneath the surface. Jasmine was battered so severely that she later succumbed to cardiorespiratory arrest, and our friend Giovanni was sucked deep into those underwater passages and drowned. 2 young lives, just erased in under 60 seconds by a totally invisible hydrodynamic force.
Which brings us to number 4, physiological collapse, the extreme abyss of the blue hole.
For our final case today, we are descending into the Blue Hole in Egypt. Back in April 2000, a highly experienced diving instructor named Yuri Lipsky attempted what the diving community calls a bounce dive at this massive underwater sinkhole. A bounce dive basically means you descend very rapidly to an extreme depth and then return quickly. Yuri planned to dive all by himself down to the bottom, over 295 feet deep, and he was recording the whole thing on a handheld camera. If we track his timeline, we see him enter the danger zone at about 165 feet. By 230 feet, his camera footage reveals he is dropping way too fast. He blows right past critical safe depths and plummets all the way to the 295-foot seafloor, where severe panic immediately sets in. But why?
It all comes down to nitrogen narcosis. You see, at those extreme depths, the nitrogen in a diver's air supply actually becomes toxic to the human brain. This narcosis severely impairs cognitive function. It induces this state of profound confusion and disorientation that closely mimics being blackout drunk. Divers suffering from it simply cannot think clearly, they can't make rational decisions, and they completely lose their ability to judge danger.
And Yuri's camera captured this deeply psychological and physiological collapse happening in real time. Down at the bottom, his brain was so heavily impaired by that toxic nitrogen that he literally couldn't perform basic survival functions. He clearly realized something was terribly wrong, but his hands just frantically fumbled with his buoyancy compensator, the vest that was supposed to float him safely back up to the surface. He was just too confused to operate it. His panic led to this rapid, heavy breathing, which critically depleted what little air supply he had left. Ultimately, his impaired brain just couldn't coordinate the actions he needed to save his own life, and he lost consciousness right there on the seafloor alone.
Bringing us to our final section, respecting the unseen depths, the limits of human biology. What these 4 incredibly tragic events teach us is a vital, humbling lesson about the absolute limits of human biology. Whether it is the supersonic mechanical failure of a steel rescue cable, the chemical trap of a toxic air pocket, the hydrodynamic violence of a coastal piston effect, or physiological collapse from nitrogen at extreme depths, these natural forces operate at speeds and intensities our biology simply is not built to withstand. Specialized training and rigid safety protocols are literally the only buffers we have. Because when you look at the evidence, we really have to ask ourselves, if nature can completely erase the line between a breathtaking wonder and a fatal trap in under 60 seconds, are we ever truly in control? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning things and always respect the immense power of the natural world. I'll catch you next time.